It's been a long time since I've done one of these. Well, it's been a while. Summer and has been crazy busy. We've had family weddings and traveling and house guests and friends over. And recently I had to do a soundtrack and some Foley work sound effects for a short film that one of my kids was show running on. So school's about to start back up again, and I have a little time to get this video done and maybe a few others intermittently, and then I have to write a piece for string quartet and orchestra, so life is good. Busy. This is Bach Chorale BWV 20-7 and -11. I think that means it gets used twice in the chorale, in the cantata. I've already put the chords in, and we're just going to do mostly just chord analysis for function. There's maybe one place here where there's an interesting chord in terms of how it's voiced. And over here on this phrase, we have maybe a new way of thinking about key areas. Normally we say, what scale are we using? Does the chord progression match that? And what's our cadences? Ultimately, the cadences tell us what key we're in. There's maybe a nuance to that, which is you can have an area where at the beginning it feels like it's one key because the chords are very germane to and are indicating a certain key, and then it can bail at the end and change keys with the cadence. And we'll see that, I think, over here. But let's just have a look at this. This is it's a really sort of great direct melody from here. It's like, right? And then sort of an answer to that. And then sort of like an epilogue. Plus the repeat, right? And then here we have a second statement that sort of says, let's go away from this. And you could have harmonized this completely in the key. But Bach, being Bach, will take this to a different or related key, right? And then finally an end statement, right? So let's just sort of start. It's in the key of F. I'm gonna probably, just so we don't crowd here, try and write maybe along here the chords. We'll see. But it starts with an F chord. That's not a surprise. It's my one chord right there. These are passing tones. And then another one chord right there, right? This E diminished is basically a poor man's C chord. It's a poor man's C7. Should be like tonic, dominant, tonic, tonic, right? But because he doesn't have the actual C here, it's a 7, right? So 7 diminished, acts like a 5 chord, right? And it's in first inversion, which is very typical of our diminished 7 chords and other diminished chords. So 6 for the inversion, going to a 1-6. If we were doing this from a theory point of view, we might even call this a passing chord right there. You could put parentheses around the chord bracket and put PC or just P for passing chord right there. And then another F chord, right? So 1 again. So this is really all just about one dominant or function, 5-1, right? And then here for the cadence, this is standard 4. That's my 4 chord right there, B flat chord. And then 5 chord, and then 1. And it's a nice, perfect, authentic cadence with root to root, proper 5 chord, and root up top as well. Is that seeable in the frame? It is good. Okay. And that's our first phrase, right? Sometimes Bach intimates in the first phrase, like a device or something, like we're going to these other keys, and you can see that evident in a chord progression or secondary whatever. Sometimes even changes key in the first phrase, but in this case, he's just like, nope, let's establish the whole key right here. It's very, very standard. This would be great for first-year students to get their analysis feet underneath them, because there's not too crazy things going on here, right? All right, so we still have a 1 chord here where there, and let's just look ahead at our cadences, because cadences sort of tell us a little bit about what key we're going to be in. And we see I have a C chord right there, so it's either likely, a half cadence in the key of F, or, because that would be my 5 chord, or we've changed to the key of C, which is the dominant, which is also something that happens a lot. But as we look here, if this was in the key of C, then we'd be looking for a G chord or a G7 chord here, and we don't, we have an F. It's possible it's playable, but it doesn't seem right. Also, if we were going to the key of C, then you'd see these B flats right here become B naturals, especially at the end as we approach, and that's not the case. So chord progressions and scale usage tell us that we're probably just in the key of F the whole time, and that also it's just a half cadence. And also you can just hear it, like as you play through this phrase a little bit, just the actual chords, right? You get to the relative minor here, right? Which is fine, right? We have an interesting chord voicing here we'll talk about in just a second. And then we get, you know, it's fine, but nothing tells us that we're going to be in the key of C. There's no changes in the way the chords are voiced. There's no B flats changed to B naturals, right? And so we get to here, and then just there. Okay. It's totally half cadence. So we can analyze this whole thing probably in the key of F. So 1 goes to 6, right? D minor. And let's talk about this chord right here. It's tempting because we're looking for 5 chords to think of this as a 5 chord, because we've got the C and we've got a G and a B flat. But this D here, you could say, well, is it like a suspension holding through? That's one possible way to do it. Or this is my non-chord tone and that is there. In the end, you need to use your ears, but both to my ears and because the B flat is in top here, this feels then like a non-chord tone resolving to a chord tone. And so what we end up here is a G, B flat, and D, right? So this is a G minor chord right there. So 6 goes to 2, right? And first inversion. And then that goes to a 3. And this is a little bit strange because you might think, well, 2 doesn't usually go to 3. In fact, 3 is pretty rare. But we do know that chord progressions can go up by step, and this sets up a 5-1 relationship back to my 6 chord right there, right? Which then takes me to a 7, diminished 6, right? It's my pseudo 5, which goes to my 1, which then in first inversion goes to my 5 chord for the cadence, a half cadence right there. Just that this can be very confusing both to our ears a little bit. I'm just going to play that first part again. We get right here, and this makes sense, relative minor, right? But then we get this right here, and because the non-chord tone is in the bass note really controls our perception of what's consonant and dissonant. And because this is there, and this is sitting right there, that dissonance is hard for us to interpret. And then it resolves there to there, like that. I think if you listen to it enough, you get the impression that it's a G chord rather than a dominant chord. Also, if this were a C chord right here, then it's our 5 chord, and we'd really want it to go to another F chord, 5-1, or straight to the 6 chord, like that. And it just doesn't. So that's a little bit different from what we're used to. All right. Here is a place where we have a G minor 7 going to a C7 going to an F. This is my 2, 6, 5 because of the inversion, going to a 5 with my 7 right there, going to a 1. And this is a perfect authentic cadence. We've got C going root to root. We have the root at the top here. And that would seem that we could do the rest of this in the key of F. And I think you can, if you really want to. You could call this A chord right here. You could call this, I'm going to write this above so that it doesn't get in the way. You could call that 5, 6 of 6, like that, if you want to. And that would be perfectly fine because our cadence is in the key of F. And so we'd say this is just transient. It's not really there. But when I play this from here, I'm going to play from right there. We get to our half cadence right there, right? It really does feel like it's changing to the relative minor. It's a place that we go to so often that this is something we expect. Now we go to the relative minor. And the D persists, right? Going to a G minor chord, which would be its 4 chord, right? And there again. And I feel like that whole measure just says, oh, I'm in the key of D minor, right? And then Bach says, no, we can't stay there because we really want to cadence properly like this, right? And it's really nice. So I think there's 2 ways to do this. Normally, you'd say, what's my cadence? And then you'd make this fit. And if that was the case, then this would be my 6th chord. This would be my 6th and 1st inversion. This would be a 2 chord, right? This would be another 6 chord. And then this would be my 2, 6, 5, 5, 7, 1 right there. That's fine. But when you listen to this enough, it really does feel like we're in the relative minor. And in this case now you can say above what the cadence is there, especially when it's idioms like going to the relative minor, you might say, well, actually I'm in the key of D minor briefly. And this is my 5, 6, going to my 1, going to my 1, 6, going to my 4, going to my 1 again. And, you know, this strong adherence to the 1 chord, like with just 1 alternate chord right here, is very similar to the first phrase right there. And I hear sort of an analog there as well. That being said, at some point you have to say this equals 6, which then takes you to your 2, 5, 1 strong cadence like that. Both are fine. I think this is a little more nuanced. And I see this all the time in a lot of things in the hymnal from our church and other places, that you can have, in addition to saying, well, this is the cadence, therefore the key, you'll have areas that feel like they're in their own little bubble, like civilizations that start but then eventually convert to another key. It's something to think about. All right, let's take a look here. G minor. So remember that we're not likely to cadence on a 2 chord in the key of F. So we have to say, well, is this a 1 chord or is this a 5 chord? And if you look, there's the D7 right there, and this is my dominant chord going to 1. So this is definitely 5, 7 going to 1 in G minor. Is that in the frame? Kind of in the frame. We'll do that like that right there. Okay, good. Which means that although it's starting with another F chord, we're gonna change things out. Okay, let's build forward a bit and build backward a bit, because basically we're going to start in a key and then we're going to shift to another key. Often it's done with what we'd call like a common chord or a pivot chord. We have some funky chords going on here. A half diminished 7 going to a B minor, C sharp diminished 7, and so on, right? So let's try and figure this out, how this happens. D minor, it could be a minor 5. Could be a minor 5, but that seems a little weird. It's also got a sus note right there, right? Sus 4. Or maybe this whole thing is D7, and it's just D, right? Sus 4. So that's fine. Then let's take a look at this right here. C sharp, E, G, B flat is a C sharp diminished 7. That's the 7 diminished 7 of the D minor, which is my 5. I think that's probably the right way to look at it. Okay, so we have to consider these weird other chords here. I think I have this actually done wrong. It says B, should be B flat. That's not going to be minor. It's B flat, D, F sharp, which is a B flat augmented chord right there. Okay, and that's a little strange. It's 3 in the key of G minor. It also doesn't really make sense in the key of F either. And what happens here is we talk about this really briefly when we're talking about chord qualities in different keys when we're in college, is that if we're using, let's see, where can I write this on here so that it's fine to look at? If we're using the natural minor in the key of G minor scale, then 3 is a major triad. But if you use the melodic or harmonic minor, then 3, this note changes from F to F sharp, and it becomes 3 augmented. And I think that's what's going on here. He's trying to help us get into this new key here, and the voice leading is to take us down a half step and back up and intimate the leading tone that's going to come up again here for the key of G, F sharp to there. And as a result, we get a augmented 3 chord, right? So it's 3 augmented, and it's 6 like that. Is it a augmented 6 chord in the original, sort of like German, Italian, French kind of thing? I'm not so sure about that. I don't think so. It's just an augmented 3. Just kind of fun. All right, let's go from the front. If we're in the key of F to begin with right here, then this is my 1, and this is my 7 diminished chord right there, which is similar to what we've had up here. We have an A half diminished 7. What is that? Well, I think that's going to be our 2 chord, isn't it? Right? Because if I'm in the key of G minor, then I've got an E flat, right? And 2 is half diminished. So this is my 2 half diminished, and because it's there, it's going to be 4-3 in the key of G minor. We just did there. Wow, that's really messy. Let me see if I can do this here. 2 half diminished, 4-3, and I'm in the key of G minor from that point on. And then we get a 3 augmented chord in first inversion, and I get my 7 diminished 7 of 5. Then I get a 5 sus, going to a 5-7, going to a 1. It's pretty cool. Yeah. I'll play this. You're going to hear the transition happen because of these chromatic lines. You know, I think if we thought really hard about it, we could try and come up with some sort of chromatic pivot chord. But I think the best thing to think of is like he's starting this in this key, and then he says, I need to get to G minor, and he says, if I take this line down, so he's going, right? Kind of thing that he wants to do. So as a result of that, you know, or because he can do that, he gets these cool, now it starts to change, right? Which then goes to here, which is my augmented, right? Which then curls into the diminished 7 up, like that, and then finally says, okay, let's get out to our cadence. So, a lot of times we actually see this in jazz, where you say, why do we have this funny quality chord? And it's just because it's a natural effect of what happens when you have these chromatic lines that composers like Duke Ellington and people like that are naturally doing. It's cool, right? I've always been told from the time I was in school that Bach was one of the original jazz musicians, and I kind of feel like that's it right there. He's just going, let's go like do, ti, le, la, right? Do, ti, te, la, le. But then you think of it in new key. Do, ti, and now we're going to call this not te, but we're going to think in the new key. Le, so, fi, so, do. Right? Just kind of fun. And then this last one here, we have to get back to the original key. You notice that there's no accidental. This is just helping us remember that we're not doing this anymore, because we're back in the key again, and we can just, you know, this is like a, oh, you know, by the way, this is a PAC in that key right there. But we're going to have a PAC down here in the key of F again, and I think we can just pivot and say we're in the key of F again. Here's a 1-6, right? And then here's my 4 again, passing tone. Here's my 5, there's my 7th, which is a passing tone. And then this is a deceptive progression because I'm going to go to my 6th chord, which is kind of cool. And then here's my 1 chord again. And you might say, well, 6 doesn't normally go to 1. And that's true. But if you look at these notes right here, like normally it doesn't. you'll notice that it's making the E and the G again, which is sort of the basis of this E, G, B flat 7 chord that we've had here and here. And if you listen, it does feel like he's accomplishing a 6 going back to the 5, this chord basically. You could even think of it as a 5 partial again, right? So if we go from the beginning of that phrase, you have your, see, where am I? Over here. I'm gonna look sideways on the, I'm looking at the paper in front of you and not the keyboard, right? So there's my 1, 6 right there. And then it's just gonna say, no, we're back in the key of F. Here's my 5 chord, and then surprise, diminished, right? But then he says reset, that right there feels like a 5 chord function again, and then cadence, right? So, yeah. This is fun because this is sort of very similar to the rising line we had at the beginning, but this time he says surprise. I made you look. You can, if this is important to you, call this like a 7 diminished passing chord if you want. But I think it's just fine just to observe that chord progression rules don't always apply, especially if you have substrata or between beat things that imply chord progressions. 1 passing tone, 5 sus, right there, it's nice, right? And then 5, because this is holding through with my 7 right there, which again is sort of repeating that thing that he did earlier as well, right over here with the sus as well. Yeah. This is a really fun piece, and I think it has lots of things in it that both reinforce beginning theory ideas, but then gives us room for thought, like the ideas of being in an area of a key for a while artificially, and you can analyze it in that key area, but knowing that the cadence is going to switch out at the end, and seeing how this melody could just be completely harmonized in the key of F with a half cadence here, but instead he wants to go to a different key for interest and depth. So he goes to the key of G minor. And just one last thing, remember that, I'll put this up here, when you think about keys to go to, you can make this box right here. If you've watched a lot of these, you've seen me do this before. But if I'm in the key of F, then I'm going to go to the key of C, that's my dominant, and the key of B flat, that's my subdominant. This is 1 flat, 2 flats, 0 flats and sharps, right? And then the relative majors, D minor, G minor, and A minor. And you don't go to all of them, but a lot of times majors will go to their dominants and relative minors. And if you're going somewhere else, you play in this area like this, right? And similarly, if you were in the minor, you go back. But we see this happen, right? He's in the key of F, and then although he doesn't perfectly change key here, he does play in the key of D minor pretty hard right there. And then he says, well, let's go one other place, G minor, right there, right? So, all right. Hope everybody's fall is going great. And yeah, I'll try and do more of these as to get back into a normal school routine now.